All right, so recently Peter Schiff was on the Valuetainment podcast. Again, obviously Bitcoin and gold were brought up. And again, this specific clip, they posted on April 10th, if you want to go see it. So again, I wanted to go through it. And again, let's talk about the arguments that he makes and go over them. So I have 5 timestamps here, about a minute 20, 4:40, 5:20, 9:40, and 12:20 if you want to get into specifics. The volume is not working on my computer, so I'm going to have to play it through a different device. So let's get to the first one and go over it.
The biggest cards, it's 1 of 5, PSA 9, BGS 9. So each of these are between $500,000 to $1 million. So you have choice. You got $1 million of gold. You have $1 million of collectible cards. But you got $1 million of Bitcoin on this phone when you carry. Okay? Do you see the argument on how they sell Bitcoin transferable? If you had a choice between $1 million between the Bitcoin in your wallet, the gold, or the collectible cards, what do you choose?
Well, I don't know that much about the collectible card market. I figure that the spreads are probably pretty wide there, and the market is very dependent on the collector demand. I mean, whether there are people who want to buy those cards or not. I mean, it's a unique market. I have a good friend of mine in Puerto Rico has made a ton of money on cards. Now he's in jerseys. He's buying the jerseys of the players. But look, I don't know that market, so I would just take the gold. I mean, the gold is pretty stable. I think the price is going a lot higher, very liquid. I don't have to worry about a lot of different factors that might impact the value of those collectible cards. But I would take those cards over the Bitcoin.
You would take the cards over the Bitcoin?
Well, I don't think the Bitcoin has any real value at all. I think it's just a speculative mania. I mean, sure, there are fools out there who will buy Bitcoin who don't understand that it has no value. And as long as there's a supply of greater fools, the fools that bought earlier can sell out to a greater fool who buys later. But, this is
a... Do you think Michael Saylor and...
Okay, so he kind of makes 2 arguments here. The first thing that I would point out here is, again, this kind of just proves just how biased and I would say misleading he is, in that, again, he admits that he doesn't know anything about collectible cards, but you still will take him over the Bitcoin, like, still will take him over the gold, like, that doesn't make any sense. And the other argument he makes is the one that he probably makes the most, is the whole, Bitcoin has no value. Bitcoin has no value. And again, this is very easy to disprove, because when you're saying that something has no value, well, that's an opinion by definition, because value is simply a market-based thing. And again, I'll give you a good example, right? I'm sure everybody has heard stories of, an uncle or a grandpa or a dad or whatever dying, and the family going and selling their cards or something that is extremely valuable for pennies on the dollar. And the reason for that is that they have no idea how much it's worth. They don't value it. So my whole point here is value is subjective. I mean, you could give people, $1 million paintings. Like, you could have some uncle who dies off and he's all alone, and again, the family comes and sells off his $1 million painting for $20. I've heard several stories of people selling $1 million trading cards for literally dollars, because they have no idea how much it's worth. And again, the whole point there is value is completely subjective. Some people, again, look at Bitcoin. A lot of people could care less. Look at gold. I mean, I seen a video of someone that I follow on YouTube, and again, they literally go around to people and say, "Would you rather have an ounce of gold or $100?" The clear majority of people say the $100, even though the gold's worth like 25 times or whatever it is now, more than that. Right? Because again, people don't value it. So again, the whole point here is that it's completely subjective. And again, this is also very frustrating, because Peter's a free market guy, and again, I think he's right about that side of things. But again, he's big on the free market, letting the market determine this stuff, not government bureaucrats. And again, the same thing goes for Bitcoin. And again, the last point he makes here is that, it's a speculative bubble. Can you give me another example of a speculative bubble lasting for over 15 years? Again, he's compared it to, he doesn't do it as much anymore because it makes him look stupid, but he's compared it to Tulip Mania, which lasted, I think it was less than a year. Right? And this is my point here. Let's just say he's right about that. How many years before it's no longer a bubble? Is it 20 years, 25, 30? Like, how many? And this is another reason why you know that he's misleading people, or he's just so out to lunch it's not even funny. Because if he was genuine, if he was honest, if he wasn't misleading people, he would say, okay, well, if it happens for this long, then I'll admit I'm wrong. Like I've said time and time again that if gold outperforms Bitcoin over a, for sure, 10-year period, but maybe even 5-year, but for sure 10-year period, I would be like, okay, maybe gold is the way to go. Like I would seriously consider that. Right? The fact that Peter doesn't do that just proves in my mind I think he's misleading people. So let's go to the next timestamp here and let's go over the next thing that he says here.
When the speculators who bought these ETFs decide they don't want them anymore and they sell, those ETFs have to take their Bitcoin and sell them into the spot market. There won't be enough liquidity to absorb that selling. The price is going to crash. And what's happened in prior Bitcoin crashes is all of a sudden the supply of Tether just increases. And Tether comes in, people come in and use Tether to buy up a bunch of Bitcoin. But when these ETFs get the sell orders from their customers who decide to get out of the trade, cut and run when they're down 20 or 30%, and they decide, I want out of this trade, and now BlackRock or all these companies have to go into the market and sell Bitcoin at the market that day to settle by the end of day in US dollars. No Tether. They can't send Tether to their customers. I think it's going to be the biggest crash we've ever seen in Bitcoin. The smart money has been selling their Bitcoin to these ETFs ever since they launched.
Brandon, what do you think? Young guy.
Okay, so again, this is another thing that needs to be pointed out here. That a lot of people talk about like, oh my God, he's this genius. He's making this amazing point. But again, it needs to be pointed out here that Peter, let's just say Bitcoin does crash, right? For whatever reason. He's been bearish for over a decade. I know for a fact, Peter Schiff, he's known about it for over a decade. When he first known about it, honestly, I do not know, but I know 100% for sure. I've had people that have said, yeah, I told him about it in like 2012, right, when he was still bearish. So that's the point here. The point here would be quite simple, that even if he's right, it's the classic, he's predicted 7 of the last 2 or 10 of the last 2 crashes. Yeah, you're right, but you've been a perma bear. If you would have bought at the start of you being bearish and it comes down, well, you're still going to be up massively. So again, that's something that needs to be pointed out. That I think everything else he said there is irrelevant. That the main point here is that you've been bearish for over a decade. If he would have put 10% of his wealth into Bitcoin a decade ago, and he had as good of a chance as literally anyone, because I can name a handful of people off the top of my head that have said, yeah, I told him about it and he didn't like it. And again, you can see his tweets. I think I've seen tweets from like 2013, 2014 saying, yeah, it's up to 3,000, you better sell. It's just utter insanity that he actually makes some of these arguments with a straight face. So let's get to the next clip here, and let's go over the next one. I think this is the one that I really wanted to get to.
Back on television, $1 million Bitcoin, pie in the sky predictions. Meanwhile, it's not going anywhere. They're hyping up this halving. That's another bunch of BS. We're getting ready for another big dump. It's all about pump and then dump. And when they pump it up, yes, they generate that fear of missing out, and people get suckered into it. But I think, as I said, the guys that own it now in these ETFs, even though one of them has actually got HODL as the symbol, these are not hodlers. In fact, if you look at where the money came from to buy the Bitcoin ETFs, a lot of it actually came out of gold. The gold ETF saw huge redemptions in the few months following the launch of the Bitcoin ETF. And I think some gold people that, got tired of waiting for gold to go up, did FOMO into the Bitcoin ETF. I think a lot of people that own gold stocks, that's why, gold stocks were getting crushed. I was watching gold stocks go down about 15% after the Bitcoin ETFs were launched when gold didn't go down at all. It's like, why is this? Why are people selling off these gold stocks? It was probably, all right, well, let me sell my gold stock. I'll buy this Bitcoin ETF. So that money is not there forever, especially when they start to see gold really going up. The gold stock, gee, maybe I shouldn't have switched. Maybe I need to go back. It's going to be like a Roach Motel. Your money checks in, but it doesn't check out. Because when you try to sell, if enough people try to sell, the bottom is going to drop out because they have to go into the market. And actually, too, I think one of the things that's been supporting Bitcoin temporarily is a lot of hedge funds are shorting MicroStrategy stock and buying Bitcoin. So that's some of the Bitcoin buying is because of MicroStrategy selling. But when they unwind those trades, because MicroStrategy stock collapses, they have to buy back their MicroStrategy shares, and now they have to sell their Bitcoin. So that's another big potential seller of Bitcoin is the closing out of the MicroStrategy.
What percentage of your...
Okay, so again, this is another... His whole shtick basically is I'm just going to come up with as many theories as I can for a potential crash. And again, like I already pointed out, he's said this numerous times. Numerous. Like I don't know why when you were saying the exact same thing when it was at $3,000 and probably even less than that, how can you still view yourself as credible? And again, another thing that I don't know the exact numbers off the top of my head, but the one thing I do know for certain is that another thing that he always likes to point out is that, oh my God, people investing in Bitcoin, they're just speculating. It's just some big bubble. But the data disproves that. Now, again, I don't know what the exact numbers are, so I don't necessarily take my word here, but I'm rather certain that the clear majority of Bitcoin has not moved in over 4 years. Again, fact check me on that, but I'm pretty sure that the clear majority of Bitcoin has not moved. So this idea that, oh my God, people are just speculating, it's like, no. The data does not bear that out. I mean, you look at the ETFs, they have maybe 500,000 Bitcoins. So you're talking about, it's in the low single digits, the percentages that they hold. So, I mean, if they all decided to, I mean, they wouldn't be able to dump it tomorrow. But let's say over a month period, they decided they're going to dump all of it. Bitcoin would come down, maybe 10 or 15%. It's not going to be some massive crash. And I mean, if that happened, you'd have Saylor and, all these areas, like, they would start buying. So this is another argument that Peter doesn't say as directly as a lot of other people say, but a lot of people like to compare Bitcoin to kind of, number one, they lump all crypto together, number one, which is it just proves they're either lying to people or they don't understand anything. They're clueless. And the other thing that they do, another thing too that I've noticed about a lot of these people is that they never go after the scammy altcoins. I would venture to say the vast majority of altcoins are scams. They are pump and dumps, in my opinion. But you almost never hear that from these kinds of people. Now, why is that? And I think the reason is Bitcoin is they're really the only crypto that poses a legitimate threat to the existing system, or in Peter Schiff's case, gold, that exists. Like, a lot of people like to hype up Ethereum. Ethereum could be regulated overnight if the government wanted. Bitcoin cannot. And I think that's the reason there. So let's get into the last clip here, and then I'll give my final thoughts.
Dividend approach. It's almost all non-U.S. stocks. I mean, I own a few U.S. stocks, but not many. It's mostly foreign stocks that are in that. You
own more foreign stocks than U.S. stocks?
Oh, by far.
Tell me why. Why is that?
Well, one of the reasons is I want to get out of the dollar, right? So these foreign companies have most of their revenues that are not dollars, so I like that, and they're not priced in dollars on the exchanges. In general, you take a foreign company with the same earnings as
So again, there's one other point here to bring up too that I wanted to bring up is that a lot of people talk about Peter Schiff like, oh my God, he predicted the housing market crash. He's some amazing genius. Same goes for Michael Burry. But what they don't tell you about a lot of these people is that, I mean, Peter Schiff, was equally, I don't know if I'd say staked his reputation on, but that's what I'll go with, on being bearish on the dollar coming out of the '08 crash. And he was massively wrong on that one, and he still is. Now again, I'm not necessarily bullish on the dollar, but this is something that isn't talked about nearly enough when it comes to Peter Schiff, is that he's gotten this so wrong, and he receives very little heat for this. And I think he deserves a lot more, because he's been way, way wrong on this. I mean, the same goes for guys like Michael Burry. I mean, Michael Burry got one thing right, and people talk about him like he's Warren Buffett. The reality is, again, he's been wrong about virtually everything else. And not to mention, too, he's another perma bear, which again has cost him and people who listen to him a lot of money. And again, the other thing I wanted to bring up here is that I don't remember exactly. I should have noted it down, but I'm pretty sure Peter Schiff brought up the argument of, gold's been outperforming Bitcoin over the last 2.5 years. And again, this is the last thing I'll touch on here, because I've gone on long enough here. This point in particular proves beyond a shadow of a doubt in my mind that, again, Peter Schiff is lying and misleading people. People who are still trying to give him the benefit of the doubt after finding out that I don't even know what to tell you. And the reason for that is Peter Schiff just happened to cherry pick. And again, when I say cherry pick, this is the textbook definition of cherry picking, quite literally the top of the last Bitcoin halving cycle. And that's when I'm going to compare Bitcoin to gold. He could go 6 months or a year, for sure a year or more, in either direction, and Bitcoin would be outperforming gold. So quite literally, if you go back over the last 15 years, if you would have measured from any point in time other than late in 2021, again, if you go back like a month or two, gold would be outperforming. But 95% of the time over the last 15 years, if you were to pick any random point in time, 95% of the time, Bitcoin would be outperforming. And the clear majority of that, it would be absolutely destroying gold. But Peter Schiff just so happened to pick out, almost down to the month, the time to where gold would look the best against Bitcoin. Again, if you have to cherry pick to that extent to try and prove your point, you're lying to people. And again, I really don't know what to say anymore when it comes to that. So, and again, the last thing I'll leave it on here, again, I've made all my points. I've never said that gold is worthless, or even that I'm bearish on gold, to be honest. I've said, I know for sure at least once or twice, but possibly more, that I think gold probably roughly probably 5-10%. They probably roughly keeps track with the market. Now again, it's a lot easier to simply go and buy a stock on an exchange than to buy physical gold. And again, the one other point he brings up here too, now that I think about it, and again, I didn't mark this down, or I just stopped the video before he said it. Another thing that he says is, Patrick brings up the whole you can easily transport, or you can easily transact in gold as opposed to Bitcoin. And Peter says, if you really wanted to, you could tokenize gold and do it that way. Okay, well, you're not really proving a point there, in my opinion, because if gold was so superior, why would you have an incentive to tokenize it? That's just acknowledging that Bitcoin is superior. And again, another point that I'll bring up here as well is, and this is something that not nearly enough people understand, and a lot of people genuinely will try and argue the exact opposite of what's true when it comes to this, is that a lot of people say, I prefer Bitcoin, or I prefer gold because I can hold gold in my hands. The problem with that is that what you're trying to argue is, I prefer gold because I can hold it in my hands and know that it's the real thing. That's what people are implying when they say that. The problem is they either don't know what they're talking about, or again, they're lying to people. Because if I want to go buy a car, or a trading card for someone with gold, I don't know that it's real gold unless it's been verified by someone. You have no way of knowing. I mean, look what happened in the Roman Empire. They slowly, over time, reduced the amount of gold and silver in their coins, and eventually it was almost nothing. But then you could have a layer of gold, and the inside be copper or tin or whatever cheap metal you want to use, and how would you know unless you inspected it? Bitcoin, you know for sure that it's real. That's something you never have to worry about. And it's just mind-boggling that people will argue that their whole argument basically implies that, oh, but you don't know what's going on if you're using Bitcoin, when you do, and you do know what's going on when you're using gold when you don't. Now again, I'm not saying that it's a normal thing for people to be transacting in fake gold, but it certainly is possible. But it's not possible to get fake Bitcoin. It's just not. So again, these are just things that frustrate me. And again, the final point that I will leave it on here is, if you need to straw man the other side to try and prove your point, it just proves that you're wrong. The fact that Peter and all these kinds of people will never entertain the actual best arguments that people make for Bitcoin, the fact that they never do that, in my mind, and I don't think any reasonable person would argue against this. People are just too emotional, and people don't understand critical thinking nowadays. That if you can't steel man your opponent, your opinion is worthless in my mind. And again, I'll give you an example here. If, let's say you're a scout for a football team, right, and you got to decide on who's the better player, but you've only ever seen one of the players play, I think everybody would agree that you cannot, and in any conceivable fashion, have a rational opinion on who's the better player. And the same thing, again, people might be saying, okay, what are you getting at here? What I'm getting at is a lot of these people, Peter Schiff, I don't think that that's the case. I think he's just straight up lying to people. But again, a lot of these traditional investment guys, that I think they genuinely fall into this category, they've never actually looked into the use case for Bitcoin. They've never listened to Michael Saylor, Matthew Crater. Like these are the experts. Go listen to them and come back to me. Until you do that, no sane person should take what you're saying seriously. So anyway, that's what I wanted to bring up today. If you liked the video, please like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and stay tuned for more.